Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our September 14th edition of Bull Sessions. My name is Mark Robertson. I'm joined here by Ken Kavula on this fine autumnal day in central and mid-Michigan. How are you, Ken?
I'm doing just fine. It is a beautiful day out there, but they're calling for, up here at least, they're calling for some severe thunderstorms again starting around 5:30, 6 o'clock.
Wow.
We got hit by a really bad one just north of Brighton yesterday. I have never driven through a hailstorm with hail that I could see, and it felt like a giant was tromping on top of the car. I'm extremely surprised there's no dents in my car, however. So,
Well, all the insurance companies will be happy about that.
yes.
Yeah, that was as dark as I've seen in a long time. So our weather is, to those of you who have not been to Michigan, quite variable. Those of you who are listening in from Michigan, and there's a number of you in the audience, you know the drill. The weather changes frequently and sometimes quite substantially for us. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get underway, Ken. What I did is I basically went back for this session to dig in even a little bit deeper on our annual effort for best small companies. I've begun to receive some nudges from the audience. A couple of them actually made the short list for the dashboard right now. So the ideas are flowing, and we just want to continue to encourage that. We want to come up with the strongest list possible for the coming year, and hence the rabbits on the screen and a couple other teasers there, again, just to remember this past weekend and the stuff that we should remember. And Budweiser was actually out with a redo of a commercial that they only ran once, but I think they ran it more than that this weekend. Basically remembering the events of 9/11. And that image on the right is to Quantum Falls in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and that's what it'll look like in just a couple of weeks probably. And it's one of the more spectacular waterfalls in the country. All right, let's go ahead and get underway, Ken, if you're all set. Here's our standard disclaimer. No investment recommendation is intended. This is about education and demonstrating the philosophies, methods, techniques, analytical approaches, and just general common ground of how to discover a better company, an excellent company, and how to deem whether it is potentially a good value or on sale. The Modern Investment Club movement's been doing it for over 8 decades, and that's simply what we're trying to interpret, understand better, and share. Everything that you hear is an opinion. Please do your own homework of any company that is mentioned. We will talk about real companies in real time, deploying some of those analytical methods, and we will try to remember to acknowledge when we actually hold something in our own accounts. We do a monthly program called the Roundtable. The next one is the final Tuesday in September. That's at 8:30 Eastern time. Come in your jammies and totes your favorite beverage and just sit back while we look at 4 or 5 current stock ideas. If you'd like to be added to the reminder about that event, send an email to nkavula1@comcast.net. If you have any questions here or suggestions for future topics, or you'd like copies of the slides, please send me an email at markr@manifestinvesting.com. All right, here's some of the topics in our queue known as the bullpen, and we will be getting to them, but today we do want to kind of dial in and focus on this thing I'm calling the challenge. We're basically going to lay out the companies that seem to be making the short list here in the early day. We work between now and Halloween to come up with a list of approximately 20, but I don't think we're even completely concrete on 20, Ken. I think we're even flexible on that. We'd probably reduce the number if we didn't find 20 companies that we could warm up to. Is that your take on it too?
That's my take, that we would maybe reduce the list. I'm not sure that we would expand the list much past 20, maybe 1 or 2, but I told you before this whole thing started, if the process that we're using isn't broken, let's not tinker with it too much, you know.
No,
So
we certainly don't want to do that.
yeah, what I would like to hear from our audience, and our audience at Bull Sessions is a particularly bright audience. If you spot a company that you know has a significant flaw, I'd love for you to tell us what that flaw is so that we could zero in on it. Sometimes parts of this list are as new to Mark and I as they are to the people that are reading it. And so if you come across a company that you have experience with and you know something glaringly wrong about the company or bad about the company or its management, please don't keep it to yourself thinking that everybody knows. Share it. Share it with me, share it with Mark, share it with the audience, so that we can come up with a list that reflects the best that we can possibly do.
Yeah, and obviously, I think it goes without saying that the flip side applies. If you discover a really cool company that just seems to sing to you as you do your analysis and look at your business model and your visual analysis and all of that, we definitely want to hear about that too. So we will be spending I would say most likely a portion of each of the next 4 or 5 sessions on this topic, probably drilling into one of the aspects that we're going to be talking about here in a few minutes. One of our favorite sources, and getting specific about some of the companies that are discovered along the way. All right. Well, here's our graphic, and it's kind of the traditional one of as we come into Halloween. Ken gets the heebie-jeebies when we talk too much about it, but as we've got 6 weeks left to go. But I'm just going to confidently and hopefully lay it out there. We have managed to outperform the Wilshire 5000 for 6 straight years, and we're on a path to do that again. Now that can change dramatically. It's been pretty. I would say it's been every bit of a challenge to stay ahead of that Wilshire 5000 this year, and we have managed to do that despite a couple of clunkers. We have a couple of really good ones too, but we'll keep our fingers crossed, Ken, and hope this doesn't jinx us too much.
Well, I know, Mark. I'll tell you, benchmarking any portfolio this year has really resulted in some surprising things. We regularly benchmark where our clubs are standing, and we'll get a club return of 30 or 35 or 38%, and then find out it's just barely beating the Wilshire or it's barely losing to the Wilshire, and that's certainly a surprising idea when you have numbers in the mid 30s or high 30s. So the same thing's happening here.
It certainly is, and it beats investing in mattress stuffing, that's for sure. But and the other thing, you mentioned benchmark. I've actually gotten this question a few times. In fact, I was assertively accused of doing something wrong by an investment professional, and he basically said, you're comparing apples and oranges. And I said, well, maybe, but not really. We're comparing the performance of a group of best small companies trying to identify opportunity in that realm, and basically contrasting it with what if we just threw our hands up and invested in a Wilshire 5000 index fund. And we kind of think about just about everything that way. Benchmarking against one of those larger general stock market indices is, we're basically comparing how we do versus that. Just throwing our hands up and investing in one of those indices themselves.
I also think it's amazing, Mark, how closely a lot of the major indexes follow each other as far as percentages are concerned. And I know a lot of times people will make a big deal about, in our chapters contest, for example, we benchmark against the S&P 500, and we have people making a big deal about that sometimes. But the winners are the winners, no matter who you're benchmarking against, and whether it's an extra 2% to the good or an extra 2% the other way. Those benchmarks, those indexes, all seem to run pretty much together. Especially over time, and I don't think we need to stand around and make a point about which is the better benchmark to use to compare to.
Yeah, and to my friend, I basically said you could be right, and he seemed to like that, and I said, or you could be substantially wrong, and all right. Just a moment here, just to grab for some elusive glory, because a few weeks ago we brought in a 1 year contest to an end, and I ended up in second place. It's only a 2 horse race.
So you want to run the 105-meter dash? Is that what you want to do, Mark?
So I'm thinking this is kind of like a Belmont thing, a little bit longer track. But actually, the reason I put this in here was not to point out that I pulled ahead of Ken, but actually, my intent in presenting this is just to point out that, boy, over the long term, these banks are not the worst ideas. That's $50,000 invested into each one of them about 13 months ago. And First Financial has been doing extremely well, and Great Southern kind of stumbled there for a quarter or so. And so I just thought I would summon the great Vince Lombardi and that quote, because I think it applies here. Anything you'd like to add to that, Ken, other than
No, nothing at all, Mark.
you already have the roses, you already have the medal, so
Yes.
this is really a shallow moment. All right. So let's go ahead and talk about one of our favorite subjects. And this is actually a screenshot of a page that I put up at Manifest, and it'll probably be quite active over the next 6 weeks or so, of the best small companies as we try to delve them out for 2022. Ken and I have been doing this together for the better part of 15 years, and even before that, within the community at the National Association or Better Investing. And we're doing pretty well here over the last few years since Forbes dropped the ball and walked away from it. And we kind of picked it up, and as was shown on that graph a couple slides ago, we've done fairly well, knock on wood. But we really think that the methodology, and we'll go through that and reinforce it here over the next few weeks, is solid. And just this notion that you can demand a substantial degree of quality from even your small companies. Your thoughts, Ken?
Well, for those of you that remember that Forbes has come back with a small company list, they just changed their calendar timing now. They did come out with one after the holidays last year, and so we'll have to kind of wait around and see if they come out with another one or if that was just a one-time only kind of thing. There's that Forbes fastest growing companies 2020, and there's the America's Best Small in 2021. So we'll see if they're going to come up with a slightly different flavor of their list every year, or whether they'll stick to Best Small or Fastest Growing or something in between. But we recognize that Forbes has come back after a 4 or 5 year absence, and they are publishing a list again.
Yeah, and they seem to have, well, it wasn't all private companies for a change. And again, our intent is to dig into all of these sources and see if there's a company that might be hiding in the brushes or just missing our view. And so we're just basically want to rake those type of companies over the coals. And these are our favorite places to turn. When we came on in the green room, Ken and I were talking about the Hoover's Emerging Handbook of Emerging Companies for 2020, 2021. And again, that's a reference book that's in most libraries and generally costs more than $300. But if you wait for a couple years to age, you can generally pick it up for single digits. And I want to track one down that I can just simply go visit in the library. It used to be featured on Amazon, where you could actually look inside the book and you could get the list of companies, which is all I wanted anyhow. But they stopped doing that because I think they figured out that put a dent in their sales. So Ken, if you can track something down when you're at the library tonight, I would like to just kind of roll through that and see if there's any companies in there that we are not yet tracking and considering for this effort.
I will definitely make an effort to see if we have one in the Flint system. Yep.
And then on the display here, you see some of our other favorite sources. Marie Frank brought us the Fortune 100 fastest growing companies a few years ago, and we've kind of taken that under our wing also, as just want to make sure that we review the list and make sure we're not missing an opportunity. The same is true for the stock selections from David and Tom Gardner at the Motley Fool. Kathy Wood is there representing the universe of exchange traded funds and mutual funds, and her fund is among the highest achieving top performers. So again, we keep tabs on what she's been up to or what she is interested in, and then try to figure out if that makes sense for us also. Same thing holds true to the gentleman to the right of Kathy. That's Chris Jenner. He's the guy who used to run the T. Rowe Price Health Sciences Fund, and he now is a principal at Rock Springs Capital Management. His area of emphasis is in medical and healthcare related emerging companies like biotelemetry, we'll talk about in a minute, and a few others. So Chris Jenner is not the other Chris Jenner that you're thinking of, this Chris Jenner, the investor. And we like to see what's on his mind, and it can be I think Massimo might have been discovered a few years ago through Mr. Jenner. And then in the other sources, Y Charts, Investors Business Daily, I actually had a couple of emails from people picking up on some companies that were in IBD here over the past week. We're going to take a look at some screens from Y Charts, which it's a first cut, and we'll do some refinement. But it really is an effort to discover the needle in the haystack. And when you guys suggest ideas that are candidates for the list, it certainly bolsters the effort, and we appreciate it.
The one thing, Mark, that's kind of stirring the pot a little bit are the large number of under $20 stocks that are technically SPACs, special purpose acquisition companies, and they're not covered in a lot of the databases, and they're not their tickers won't come up when you try various places to look for information. So you got to kind of dig just a couple inches in to find out if it is a SPAC or not, and what it might be doing is waiting for its acquisition, or the acquisition might be announced but not closed at the particular point. So we have to be kind of careful not to throw those in to the mix at the moment.
Okay. And I added that plus BI. That's a note to myself. I'd like to invite you, Ken, to tackle the BI small company screen next week and see if any companies on that fall off of our radar and should be on our radar.
Yeah, what I like about that screen, Mark, is that it's picking up the new entries to the Morningstar database real quickly.
Good.
And if something comes into that pretty strict preset screen called small companies, then it's certainly of interest to us for our list. And there's 1 or 2 or 3 companies every month that join that list that I've never heard of before. I'm thinking a lot of the time it's because they've just joined the database. So that's a good thing for us to look at.
And pardon me, everybody, I'm making notes to myself here. There's also an event called the Microcap Conference that's, I believe, going on next week. That's another source of ideas, and I'll add both of those graphics to this for future sessions.
Okay.
All right. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit. The companies that we selected a year ago, again, Halloween 2020. And this is the actual performance since then, since last Halloween, 10/30/2020. And pretty good results from the mix, again, coming in at 45% on average. Really bolstered by the banks up at the top. I'll let Ken expound on that in a minute. And down at the bottom, a couple of companies that are not delivering as we had hoped for. But yeah, quite an interesting list, and it's done pretty well against that general stock market index that we were talking about a few minutes ago.
Yeah, I would want to be kind of careful to not let the list be dominated by asset-based companies, but this list here had, 3, 4, 5 asset-based companies on it. So it wasn't dominated, but it certainly had some really good returns helping us along. 4 of them there. I don't think there's any others.
Essence, kind of.
EBIX is software, isn't it, Mark?
Yeah,
not
it's
software
kind of related.
for asset base, for insurance, for
Mhm.
credit unions, I think. Yeah.
Yep.
So, but that problem we were talking about before, you look at that total return column and you see a stock like Form Factor or Malibu Boats giving you almost 38 or 39% return. And then you look over to the far right and you see relative return of less than 1% or even negative. So there's that problem we've had chasing the Wilshire 5,000 this year. It's just been on fire. So even when you pick a stock that can return, eminently respectable numbers in any other year, you might have a difficult time even beating the Wilshire 5,000 benchmark at this point. I mean, I would take a 17% return from a stock almost any year that I'm investing, and yet this year it's losing to the market by over 20%. That's Essent.
Yeah.
So
That's a rough one. But yeah, there's a lot of those are fairly common community names, but a few of those did erupt and come out of the woodwork last year. And the asset based companies really helped us a lot.
I also think, Mark, that the movement of governments, especially the Chinese government, which is completely out of the control of anybody or anything other than the Chinese Communist Party. I think that had a lot to do with that stock at the very bottom right down there.
It certainly
And
did.
maybe it's a value lesson for us for the next year or two. I mean, it could be an indicator that these things are a screaming buy, but we don't know when the government's actually going to loosen up, or even if they're going to loosen up. I think trying to divine what the Chinese are going to do next is a very, very difficult task, best left to people other than myself or yourself. So
Yeah, it's during moments like this that you're really grateful that it's only 5% of the portfolio. That's for sure.
absolutely.
Yeah, so one of the topics that I'm sure we'll kick around in greater detail. We've talked about actually having in continuing the tradition of pick the approximately 20 stocks and hold them from Halloween to Halloween and see how you do. And that's what we've been tracking. But I'm just kind of intrigued with a slightly more active approach, perhaps using some of our selling discipline stuff. And in fact, Ken, I'm glad you brought up AutoHome. Let's go ahead and take a look at AutoHome. Is basically the Chinese autotrader.com. And what you're looking at here is from the time of selection last Halloween versus the total stock market, Vanguard total stock market. You can see that it actually came out of the gate pretty powerfully and kind of fell apart. And if you were applying our rule of 5 discipline to this portfolio, and again, not getting carried away, but in a slightly more active or protective mode, maybe it makes sense to think about having, subjecting this to that, either with a conceptual or with one of those real money portfolios we've talked about, Ken, actually applying that discipline and putting in that protective measure against something like this, because you can see it's been just a complete disaster.
Well, and it would give us a different kind of demonstration also, Mark. We don't demonstrate a portfolio that's actively managed anywhere. We do our tracking portfolio in the roundtable. We have a pretty static approach to the tin cup portfolio. Maybe a portfolio of 20 stocks that is managed with some of the things we've talked about using. Maybe that would be a great demonstration of whether our rules are actually working or whether we just think they are,
Yeah, and let me clarify, because I'm sure that probably prompted a question in some people's minds. What we refer to as the rule of 5 based selling discipline is anytime an investment lags the market by more than 20%, especially during its first year since being selected. Because, again, as Ken said a few minutes ago, there wasn't anybody here that could have predicted what the Chinese government would do. And in fact, they doubled down and tripled down on the nastiness along the way here. and just the economic challenges in addition to the other stuff. So again, it's just a matter of admitting that every once in a while you're going to run into a rule of five, that 1 out of 5 stocks that just completely misbehaves. The other thing I would point out is, I think I forgot to do this, is those bottom two that have performed so meagerly, or even the bottom three, the gains in the top 1 or 2 on the list way more than offset that. So that's what diversification and having 20 positions does for you.
Well, and it goes back to that sports reference that we make quite a bit during different times when we're talking about portfolio management, that you don't have to hit a lot of home runs in order to have a really decent portfolio. A half dozen home runs in your investing life a lot of times can make up for all kinds of strikeouts, all kinds.
Yeah, and that's really shown here pretty well, I think, Ken. I mean, here you're talking about $200 becoming $110 versus this one up here, $100 became $245. So, I mean, and that's what David Gardner just loves to point this stuff out at the Motley Fool, that, these are the ones that really bolster your performance over the long term. And you don't really have to worry so much about these.
And one of the most self-evident facts that until I heard it out loud from somebody I respected, I intellectually knew it was true, but I had to think about it when I heard it, and that's that there's only a limited amount of downside to any stock, and that's the amount of money you put into it. But there's an unlimited amount of upside to any stock that you continue to hold in your portfolio. So Western Alliance can go ahead and move to 700 as far as I'm concerned. I'm still only going to lose 300 on the bottom 3.
All right. Let's go ahead and press on. The other thing that I wanted to put out there was just to be on the alert for when we select a company, because when you go back to selecting eHealth a year ago, I just kind of wonder, it's one of the lower quality ratings in the portfolio. It's still right there. I just wonder if maybe it wasn't selected with a downward trend in quality. And I would think anytime we select one for this portfolio with a little bit lower quality ranking, I would want it to be on the upside. And here's what eHealth looked like back at the time. Again, keep in mind that the selection is right in here. So the quality was fine, and it actually has not gone down. So this one really kind of continues to be quite a mystery for me. I mean, the projected return has actually gone up. Here's a look at the value line chart, and you can see that they had a bumpy 2021. They're projected to come in and with comparable earnings to 2020. But I'm just sitting here looking at this one, and Ken, this has all the feelings of being the next, what's the one that we had in there for 4 straight years that was lost every year?
Oh, don't put me on the spot like that, Mark.
Cantel Medical. Cantel
Medical. Okay, but Cantel just never seemed to perform, though. I'll tell you.
I think it actually did better when it wasn't in the best small company portfolio.
We had some of the same kind of feelings about Mesa Labs too for a couple of years, Mark. But yeah, Mesa Labs did turn itself around a couple times and performed, and then really didn't perform. So.
And the reason I bring this one up is this one is doing the Cantel Medical dance right now. It actually shows up on the list right now for the companies for next year. So
why don't you remind the audience what this company does, Mark?
I don't know a great deal about them other than obviously they are a cyber or a cloud-based company that does a lot of work with Medicare and Medicare Part B and those type of online programs. They represent, I think, as many as 180 healthcare insurance providers, and so that's what they do. They're in the online delivery of healthcare programs, and you can see that they've had a bit of a bumpy ride, but things seem to be kind of clicking in. And if that 352 number is anything, I mean, before we do too much talking about Cantel Medical, we should talk about the flip side, and that's that Forward Air was in the best small company portfolio for about 6 straight years, and it did well every single year. So
Yeah,
taking it.
that's a more than double in a well, 1 to 2 year period. So that's a certainly something to take a look at. And my only drawback with Value Line is that I know they struggle many times with companies that are coming out of no earnings and coming into their earnings, especially
Hmm.
when the coming into earnings is dramatic. I noticed they went from losing $1 to making $2.73 in a 2 year period there. So and I know that Value Line seems to struggle with companies like this.
Sure, that's definitely early stage. So we'll
Yeah.
see how it goes. We did show this one last week. I'll just spend a moment on it. These were the original 20 companies that came up. Again, searching for companies growing in more than double digits, greater than 12%, but with a projected return on value greater than 10. Why Prove instead of Par? Par is on here too, but Prove is a little more immune to some of the PE stuff. And again, it just completely brings in the debt component also. For some of these companies do have some debt, so, and it accounts for cash. So, and then with just the ones that have
Well,
the highest manifest rank.
and Mark, I think that I'm learning to look at these two numbers together rather than in isolation. And when I see a projected annual return of 27 and a proved number of almost 23, I'm pretty comfortable. But when I see that's Green Tree Hospitality, but when I look at Mercury Systems and see a par value of 21 plus and a proved number of only 13 plus, I'm beginning to have a little bit of doubt about the par value then at that point, knowing that many times the par value, which is based on analyst tendencies to evaluate companies, has a huge dependence on a choice of an average PE, and the proved number basically doesn't rely on PE at all. So when I see a big discrepancy between those numbers, there's another one down there in Avid Bioservices. That's the ones that kind of bother me a little bit. I'd want to do a little bit deeper dive to find out why are those two numbers so different. Because when our experience is that when they are that different, there's something wrong perhaps with the PE value. There's one in the opposite direction on Ozon Holdings at the very bottom of the list.
Yeah, but that was too big. We don't have to worry about that one anymore.
Is that one too big? Okay.
Just scratch it off.
All right.
Yeah, I would agree. And Mercury is a bit of a disappointment. I featured that at the roundtable, so that PE might be a little bit high, but we'll see how they do going forward. Here's just kind of a fun fact, Ken. We often wrestle over what type of numbers we might use, and if we were doing market cap based screening, which we don't, if we were looking at companies with 2 billion or less in sales, just looking for a market cap equivalent for doing some screening, and you'll see why I do this here in a second. That would basically be 6 billion based on an average price to sales ratio of about 3, because we don't want any fat rabbits.
Mark, I agree with you. And that 1 billion cap, which was set in the Forbes list for years, I mean, that goes back quite a few years in history, 15, 16, 17 years. And we have found with numbers that are based on sales that we have to revise those numbers occasionally. I don't know if any of the rest of the audience is as old as I am, but when I first started learning BI methods and teaching BI methods, I had some pretty low numbers for the sales requirements between small companies, medium companies, and large companies. That's one of the reasons I think that I came over to the other definition, which defined growth of a company in terms of percentage growth rather than gross amount of sales. But I wouldn't see anything wrong in moving our cap to 2 billion and still calling them small.
Yeah, and people wonder why is it necessary? Well, you've got Google growing at 12 or 14%. It's certainly not a small company. I'd love to have it on the list, but it doesn't qualify as a small company. And and by the way, I don't mean to fat shame the rabbit. I care deeply about him and hope that he's doing okay. But I don't want to do that. All right, here's the companies that are on the list as of today. Kind of a top 20, and the reason that we refer to it as a challenge, because anything that we can bring out of the woodwork to challenge one of these and get on the list and bump somebody off, it's kind of a king of the hill type concept. These are the ones that actually survived. I had to remove a couple of residential construction companies like Pulte, a couple others. Some of the other companies that have disappeared from this list, like Ozon. MKS Instruments is too big, and you see the $2 billion in sales here. It's just too big, Ken. Unless we want to stretch to get that one. I kind of like that one.
No, I think we're already stretching to go up to 2 billion. I think
I think so too. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's an example of a couple of the companies that fell off the list, and that made room for a couple of others to come on. And again, we want to drag some of these over the coals. You can follow along.
Is EDUC a Chinese company, Mark?
No, EDUC is the old. It's one of those for-profit education companies that got caught.
Okay, but it is a U.S. company. Okay,
that's one of the U.S. Yeah, it's not.
All right.
They actually made the list. Marty Eckerly added it to the list, and it will fill in when the data is uploaded later today.
Okay.
And the same is true of Southern Missouri Bancorp. I got yelled at by a couple people for teasing you by not having it in the database yet. That'll be there as soon as we do an upload. But here is a look at that SMBC, and you can see why it's making the list. Obviously, we want to carefully take a look at it, but they're kind of firing on all cylinders, and whatever they're doing, this is purely pandemic related, I think. That big dip down in the price in the first quarter of 2020. Little flat spot here on expectations that kind of bothers me a bit. For earnings, don't have book value expectations, but a decent double-digit return, double-digit growth, a fairly high-quality ranking based on the up, straight, and parallels that you're seeing here. And it's definitely a contender. Your thoughts?
Well, I agree, Mark, and I just don't want to end up with a half dozen banks and insurance companies on the list. So I think we have to really hold the reins very tightly and maybe dig in just a little bit more. This is a good bank. When I look at return on average assets, though, I do note that while the return this past year of 1.8 is superb, it hasn't had a return even close to that in the last 9 years prior. So that I'm just, I guess maybe I'd like to see a little bit more of a trend in return on average assets before I were willing to say it's the best of a long list of smaller regional banks that maybe deserve a placement in the top 100 small companies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would share that same concern, especially with the slight weakness that you see in their earnings projections. Again, not a lot of analysts following, but we'll see. But it definitely makes the list for now, and it is challengeable, if that's a word.
Yep. All
right. So I spent a little bit of time with Y charts, and again, I don't want to go too deep into this. I might actually get a lot more scientific about this for a future session, but I just wanted to kind of like throwing the fishing pole in the water with a big lure on it and hoping to reel in Walter. Walter's the reference on Golden Pond for those of you that need to refresh. Market cap under 2 billion. I didn't go all the way up to 6 just because I wanted to take a look at, relatively small. I wanted very few professional or institutional sources talk about long-term sales growth, so I had to put up with EPS growth. Ugh. But I stuck that at 12 to 40 just to see what we would get. that enterprise value EV to EBIT, that's the inverse of prove. So I had to just do the reciprocal. So we want them less than 10. And I just wanted to stick to with prices above 5. And you can see there's some fairly interesting companies that pop up that could be looked at a little bit closer. This was a selection by Kim at one of the successful investing conferences right at the very top. Ken just mentioned, well, that's not the Mesa Labs, that's actually the airline. So that'll have a tough road to get there, but some interesting companies show up. And again, what we want to do is just go down that list and make sure we're not missing something. I've not run this one in a long time, probably is worthy of it. So is this one. You never know what you'll find.
I'll tell you, Mark, Meridian Bioscience is in a number of portfolios up here in mid-Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
That's certainly an interesting company. I didn't realize it was that small.
Yeah, they presented at one of our Cincinnati conferences a few years ago. Quite an effective presentation. And I have no idea what this one is, but this is an example of you never know if it's not covered in our database, and we add it. And boy, that one is really small. So it could be worth a look. And then I basically subjected the same list to what you could almost think of as a quality rating. Y-Charts calls it a fundamental score, but I wanted just the top 10% of all companies just to see what pops off the list that I've not encountered before. This is a pickleball company.
All right.
So that's all you need to know. It's a pickleball company, and maybe we missed that bandwagon, but it's probably worth an SSG. And there's a bunch of other ones. I don't know if you caught the big run up in Dick's and some of the sporting good companies out there. Here's one of them here. If that one has not also been part of that run up and it has strong operating results, that could be an opportunity. But and Marine Max kind of falls into that too.
Holosys has popped up on some of our automotive studies that we've done around here, Mark. HOLI, a small automation kind of a robots. Think of it as robots. And Marine Max, of course, pops up when you study Malibu boats.
Yep. So it's worthy. Again, the point being, run them through the mill and see if any of them challenge that list of small companies. That's the intent here. All right. So with that, and we'll probably be back with deeper dives on some of these. One of the things we do want to demonstrate is this notion of an audit on a company like Southern Missouri Bancorp, and there's others on this list that just cry out for a deeper audit to make sure that we test the veracity of the numbers. And
Mark, did the Egyptian bank make the second list? Is it still on there, or?
I don't know that I've actually added that in any greater detail.
It was on the screen last bull session, but
that's not QCR, is it? Which one was it?
I think it's MBIN, but I might be wrong.
Could be. I'll take.
We'll have to look and get back with.
I'll take a closer look. Yeah, we certainly want to subject that type of a bank possibly to a little deeper dive. All right, so with that, we'll just give our reminder that we do archive these sessions at YouTube under Manifest Investing. If you search, you will find this. All of the sessions, including bull sessions, roundtables, expected returns reviews, and any special sessions that we hold are actually there. You can actually see the 5 slides from the May 2021 conference, which we're going to talk about the November version of that here in a second. But you can actually dig back in at any one of those. We invite you to subscribe to that channel if you'd like to be notified anytime new content is posted, and we greatly appreciate that.
Dwight is making the point, Mark, that ESCA does a lot more than pickleball stuff. It makes sports equipment like Gorilla goals, wood play swing sets, bear archery, and a lot of other products. So it's not purely pickleball, but evidently pickleball is one of its products that it puts equipment into.
All right, I didn't mean to pickleball shame the company. I'm aware that they are doing a bunch of other stuff too. I apologize, but pickleball is my way of remembering it, and pickleball is growing explosively for those of you that are not familiar. All right, Ken, would you like to do a little promotion for our program here in about 2 months?
Right. I'm not going to do this every single time we have a bull session, but on November 10th and 11th, we're going to run some classes, and we're going to follow it with a stock panel on the evening of November 11th. That stock panel is filled now with some really good stock pickers. I was happy to get the personnel that we have on the panel. We have Pat Donnelly, we have Ann Cuniaz, one of our own directors from Mid-Michigan, Charlene Hansen. We have Mark, we have Cy Lynch, we have myself, and I don't think I've forgotten anybody. It should be a wonderful panel. Notice that in the last 3 conferences, we've managed to put together a list of stocks that are up 27.9%. That's a pretty good plus for a 18-month stock pick going on 2 years now. And you can see the stocks that we've picked. Go down to the very bottom of the list to find 2 of mine. So
yeah, but that's not the bottom of the list. This is the appetizer menu, Ken.
Oh, the appetizer menu. Okay.
There are a few selections that are not shown on here that it's kind of like that Vince Lombardi thing. They just need more time.
Oh, okay. The negative one.
Yeah, and a couple of mine, like bio.
Okay. I do want to let you know that one of our classes is going to be 20 questions for investors, and that's the working title at the moment. Basically, we're soliciting questions that you might have about investing, or questions that we could use as a jumping off point to make to answer and perhaps illuminate a particularly sticky problem you might be having, or talking about something that's always confused you. If you have such a question, or maybe even a couple, 3 of them, send them to me or send them to Mark. We're going to not guarantee that we get to every single question, but we're going to try to pull the 20 best together and put a program around it with Mark and Cy and myself sitting down and running a discussion about the way we would answer some of these issues. I just got a wonderful question today from somebody out in our audience that was asking about benchmarking a portfolio on her own without using any of the software. So we're going to be able to talk about some of those things. And another question's already come in about how can you make the best use of some of the graphing programs that are out there right now, and how can you get some of that to appear on your screen. There's a lot of different things you can display on these graphic programs. But if you have a question like that, please send it to me. We're in the process of preparing that class right now. We have about 7, maybe 8 weeks before the conference. Materials for registration should be going out somewhere in the middle of October, so that'll give you plenty of time to register. If you're on our list from Mid-Michigan, and if you're notified about the roundtable, then you will get the information about the COVID cancellation conference as well. So we'd love to have a nice audience, and we think it's going to be entertaining and informative. So when you get the stuff, register for it and come on, join us for just a couple of days, 3 classes and a stock panel. And that's it for right now, Mark.
Okay. All right. In your slide deck is the current groundhog standings, but I don't care because I'm not on it. So you guys can take a look at that later.
Okay.
Not that I'm bitter or anything. And we'll close with a slide from Ludington, Michigan. I think I took that picture a couple years ago. So we'll just wish everybody a great week. See you next Tuesday. And everybody get out there and hunt down some great small company ideas to share. Thanks, Ken.
Thank you, Mark. Good night, everybody.